The 8-foot alien queen had once scoffed at the very idea of taking a human to her bed, right up until the day a medical scan told her she was pregnant. A murderous wind scraped razors of ice across the unnamed world as Commander Will Watson wrestled with the failing controls of his plummeting shuttle. The frame shuddered under brutal atmospheric entry, metal screaming as system after system died under strange interference from a planet below. "Come on! Stay with me," he snarled, fingers white-knuckled on the manual yoke. Warning lights strobe red across the cockpit. Instruments flickered, glitched, then went dead. Outside, a white wasteland rushed up to meet him, interrupted only by jagged silhouettes of alien growths. The remaining thruster coughed out one last burst of power as he leveled the craft by sheer force of will. Then even that engine choked and died, leaving a suffocating silence broken only by the scream of wind through fractured hull plating. Impact hit like a hammer. The crash hurled him against his restraints hard enough to tear the air from his lungs. The world spun, slammed, and finally settled at a sickening angle. When the dizziness faded, Will realized he was hanging upside down. Warm blood crept down from a cut above his eyebrow, blurring his vision. The forward viewport was spiderwebbed with fractures but miraculously intact, offering a crystal-clear view of snow-packed ground only inches away. "Well," he rasped, fumbling with his restraints until they released, and he dropped onto what used to be the ceiling. "I've had smoother landings." A rough inventory of the wrecked interior told him most of the emergency gear had survived. His powered armor, sleek black combat plating, pride of human engineering, was still intact in its rack. In this frozen hell, that suit was a thin line between survival and a frozen corpse. He donned the armor with practiced speed, leaving the helmet clipped at his hip to save power. Then he forced the hatch open and stepped out into the alien winter. Snow swallowed his legs up to the knees. Wind ripped at his blonde hair like icy wire. His tactical HUD flickered to life inside his visor and calmly informed him the ambient temperature sat at a tidy minus 40 degrees Celsius. "Perfect," he muttered. Freezer setting. He opened a broadband emergency channel. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Commander William Watson of the ESS Hyperion. Shuttle down on unknown world. Does anyone copy?" Only static hissed back at him. Something flickered at the edge of his vision. An orange flash against endless white. Will pivoted instantly, hand goaded his pulse rifle, but saw only snow-dusted alien trees swaying the gale. He needed shelter, power, and time. The shuttle's main cells were cooked, and the backup reserves wouldn't last more than a few days in this cold. His suit's scanners pinged a large geological elevation roughly 2 kilometers to the north, rock face, possible overhangs, maybe a cave network. He set off through the knee-deep drifts, armor servos whining softly with each step. The sensation of eyes on his back refused to leave. Years of combat training kept his senses sharp even as his brain replayed the choices that had led him here. The Hyperion had been quietly surveying the sector when they'd picked up a strange energy signature. Protocol said tag it and move on. Humanity's actual habit was different. Push deeper, move faster, poke the weird thing and ask questions afterward. A crisp crack of shifting ice snapped behind him. Will spun, rifle raised. This time, he wasn't imagining it. She stood there, easily the most striking alien he'd ever seen. She towered over him, a full 8 feet of lethal grace. Her skin glowed the color of a burning horizon, and long copper hair whipped around her like metallic flame. Her armor seemed woven from overlapping orange scales, clinging close while somehow still radiating martial authority, rather than ornament. In her hands, she held a weapon that looked halfway between a ceremonial spear and a high-tech plasma launcher, aimed directly at his chest. "Hello there," Will said lightly, keeping his rifle level but not pointed directly at her. "Any chance you're the welcoming committee and not the firing squad?" Her eyes, golden, slit-pupiled, and unervingly sharp, narrowed. When she spoke, her voice rolled out deep and melodic, and to his surprise, his universal translator caught the language cleanly. "You are either fearless or foolish to trespass in the sovereign domain of the Salarian Empire, human." "Counteroffer," he replied, hopelessly lost. "Commander Will Watson, ESS Hyperion." He offered a half bow and a ghost of a smile. And you are? I am Queen Aurelia of the Salarian Empire. She paused, gaze tracking him from boot to helmet in a cool assessment. And you, she added, are my prisoner. He kept his faint, easy smile in place even as his mind ran combat scenarios in the background. Your Majesty, I'm honored, though I usually like dinner before chains and captivity. A sound escaped her, almost a laugh, but rougher and used. You jest while under threat of capture, she observed. Typical human audacity. Not audacity, Will replied. Just manners. Besides, you haven't actually captured me yet. His armor system silently analyzed her weapon, mapping its energy profile and estimating lethality. Though, I'll admit, so far, this planet's hospitality is better than I expected. Her weapon didn't dip, but something like amusement flickered across her regal features. You think charm will loosen your chains? She asked. I have heard stories of human males and their tendencies. Did you expect some pliant alien female to swoon at your feet and drag you home? Honestly, he said, I expected frostbite before lunch. Shelter was the main goal. The company of a beautiful alien queen is an unexpected upgrade. He jerked his chin toward the fattening clouds. And this storm is getting uglier by the minute. Maybe we could continue threatening each other somewhere with a roof. You dare suggest such terms to me? Her voice bristled with equal parts outrage and reluctant curiosity. I wouldn't dare suggest anything, he said, grinning. I'm just proposing we freeze to death later instead of now. Indoors, preferably. A vicious gust knifed between them, whipping snow into a curtain. Will watched her as her scales shivered almost imperceptibly. For a species supposedly built for this climate, she didn't look entirely comfortable. Your argument has practicality, she finally conceded. My outpost lies close by. You will accompany me as my captive. Lead on, Will replied, falling into step behind her, though fair warning. I'm terrible at following orders. They trudged through deepening drifts. He kept a respectful distance, watching how she moved. For all her size, she walked with predator's grace. His suit readings flagged an interesting detail. Her body radiated heat far beyond human norms, a walking furnace in a blizzard. I must confess, she said after a few minutes, not looking back. You are unlike the briefings described. The files on human males painted a different picture. Oh, Will asked. Let me guess. Smaller, weaker, not worth the bother. Her golden gaze slid to him sidelong. The data suggested your species would barely merit subjugation. He chuckled. Sounds like your intel division needs a serious upgrade. Humans specialize in being underestimated. So I am beginning to understand. They reached what seemed an unbroken wall of rock. At the Queen's touch, seamless stone dissolved into a concealed entrance. Heavy doors split apart with a hiss, revealing dimly lit corridors carved into mountain. Though, she continued as they stepped inside, I still find absurd that anyone would consider breeding with a human male. The idea is comical. Funny you should bring that up, Will began. He never finished. A thunderous explosion boomed overhead. The mountain trembled, and shards of ice and rock cascaded around the entrance. Will reacted without thinking. He tackled Aurelia through the threshold just as the doorway caved in behind them, sealing off the outside world in an avalanche of stone. They crashed in a tangled heap on the floor. His armored frame sprawled partly across her much taller body. For a heartbeat, emergency lights flickered on, bathing the corridor in amber glow. They stared at each other, breathless, inches apart. Well, Will said, still not moving. Looks like we got plenty of time to debate interspecies relationships now. The amber emergency lighting washed the outpost's interior in soft, warm tones that played across Aurelia's alien features. Will found his gaze lingering longer than was strictly professional as she stalked into what served as a command center, forced to duck under occasional low beams that hadn't been designed for a queen of her stature. The communications array is damaged, she announced, frustration roughening her musical voice. We are isolated. Will leaned back against the console, adopting a lazy posture he didn't entirely feel. Could be worse. Life support still humming. temperature stable, and I'm reading enough backup power to keep us comfortable for weeks. He tapped his armor's display. I've been stranded in places with less. She turned to face him fully. In the dim light, her golden eyes gleamed. You appear remarkably calm for someone trapped underground with Queen who may decide you are more useful dead than alive. May decide is already an upgrade from definitely hostile, he said, flashing a crooked grin. Besides, I've survived worse odds, usually with more boring company. That almost laugh escaped her again, rougher this time, like a sound she was still learning to make. You humans and your incessant attempts at charm, she said. Is it ever not a tactic? Is it working? He asked. Don't be ridiculous. But there was a faint, dangerous amusement in her tone as she stepped closer, looming over him. Though I admit you are intriguing. Most species tremble before the Salarian Empire. Maybe they never bother to get to know you, Will replied, straightening so he stood nearer to her. Up close. And you would get to know me? Her voice dropped, edged with a warning and something else. Given that we're stuck here for a while, he said lightly, I figure we might as well make the best of it. My suit has some interesting scanners. Want to know what they're telling me about Salarian physiology. Her eyes narrowed. You dare scan me? Standard procedure, he said. For instance, your core temperature runs about 15 degrees hotter than mine. Your hearts, he tilted his head, plural, by the way, beat in a pretty fascinating rhythm, and your pheromone profile spikes every time you close a distance like this. Aurelia's sunset-colored skin deepens several shades. You are infuriatingly presumptuous for a captive. Am I still a captive? He asked. Feels more like we're reluctant roommates at this point. She stepped in until only a breath separated them, forcing him to look up into her eyes. Perhaps I should remind you of your place. From where I'm standing, my place is excellent, he said quietly, though I'm open to upgrades. A low growl vibrated in her throat, more challenge and threat. You walk a perilous line, human. Will, he corrected, and I'm not playing. Something shifted in the air, an electrical tension unrelated to any failing system. Aurelia's hand rose, fingers brushing his brow with surprising gentleness as she traced a cut from the crash. Your species is fragile, she murmured, short-lived compared to mine, yet you show no fear. Should I be scared? He asked softly. Yes, she said, but she didn't move away. This is madness. The mere idea of bonding between our species is an affront to centuries of doctrine. He reached up, gloved fingertips tucking a copper strand behind her ear. Sometimes madness is just the universe trying something new. The first kiss felt like grabbing a live power conduit. Her skin burned against his, alien and irresistible. Time frayed at the edges as they pushed past boundaries that had been carved in stone long before either of them was born. Later, much later, they lay together in the outpost's cramped rest chamber. The artificial air cooled their overheated bodies, but neither reached for distance. Will traced idle patterns along the shimmering orange of her bare shoulder, fascinated by how her skin seemed to catch and scatter the low light. Still think the notion of breeding with a human male is a joke? He asked, unable to fully bear the smug note in his voice. Aurelia propped herself up on one elbow, studying him with an expression that blended humor with something deeper. You may have reshaped my views on certain subjects. Happy to broaden your horizons, Your Majesty. She rolled her eyes, a gesture startlingly human. Your ego is formidable. Part of the package, he said easily. This changes nothing, she insisted, though the conviction in her voice had thinned. If we survive long enough to be retrieved, this remains between us. The Council would never accept. More research while we wait, he suggested, grin returning. For cultural understanding, naturally. For science, she conceded, lips curling. Then her face grew serious. There are things you should know about my people, our biology, the limits of compatibility. The outpost trembled under another deep rumble. Warning lights flashed as system status feeds bled red across nearby panels. That's not good, Will muttered, reaching for his armor. The earlier blast must have destabilized the mountain, Aurelia said, already pulling on her own gear with a warrior's efficiency. We must prepare to evacuate. A violent shockwave hit, stronger than the last. Equipment toppled. The walls groaned like a dying beast under crushing weight. Time to go, Will said, sealing his helmet. Tell me there's an emergency exit. A maintenance shaft that surfaces higher up, she answered. Narrow but passable. The ceiling chose that moment to drop a fresh barrage of stone. The maintenance tunnel turned out to be a tight, claustrophobic climb, made worse by Aurelia's towering frame. Will led, armor lights cutting a pale path through the rock as they climbed to the mountain's bones. Your Majesty, he called over his shoulder. Not that I'm complaining about the view, but you've gone suspiciously quiet. Focus on climbing, human, she replied. Her voice had lost a fraction of its usual imperial steel. There was a distracted edge there that had nothing to do with falling rocks. The shaft ended at a sealed hatch. Will braced feet and back against rough stone and heaved. Armor servos whined under strain until the lock finally gave with a hiss of escaping pressure. A blistering wind punched into them as they emerged onto the mountainside. The storm had worsened. Snow blurred horizon and sky into a single seething mass. His HUD reported the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Then another data set caught his attention. Aurelia was shaking, not the controlled, functional tremor of exertion. She shivered violently, arms wrapping around herself. This is wrong, she muttered. Salarians do not feel cold. Not like this. His suit immediately began pulling up her vital signs. Numbers danced across his display, then flashed amber. Your core temperature is all over the place, he said. We need shelter. Now. He spotted a natural cleft in the rock not far off. Darkness and a whiteout, guiding her with a steady hand at her back. He half led, half supported her toward it, acutely aware of how much she leaned into him despite being nearly a head and a half taller. Inside the cave, the wind dropped to a muffled roar. He activated his armor's emergency beacon and began assembling a temporary camp of what gear he'd managed to salvage. Will, Aurelia said quietly. The uncertainty in her voice was more unsettling than the mountain quakes. Something is happening to me. He turned to see her staring at her own hand, as though it belonged to someone else. Her orange skin pulsed with faint, inner light, and his suit's sensors went wild trying to categorize the readings. Talk to me, he said, stepping closer. What are you feeling? Everything. Her breath came faster. Color, sound, sensation. All of it is amplified. She looked up at him, and now her golden eyes literally glowed. And there is something else. Something growing. His HUD chimed an urgent alert. The biological scan results painted a picture that stole the breath from his lungs. Aurelia, he said slowly, according to this, you're pregnant, she finished, voice hushed with stunned awe, with a hybrid child. She stared down at herself as if expecting to see destiny etched into her skin. Impossible. Our species are not supposed to be compatible. Somebody forgot to inform our DNA, Will said softly. He reached for her hand, and she gripped his tightly, fingers threading through his. Are you okay? A laugh bubbled out of her, this time unrestrained, bright, and shockingly human. Okay? I am carrying what may be the first human, Salarian child in recorded history. My council will collectively lose their minds. The genetic purists will demand my throne. She paused, a slow, dangerous smile curving her lips as she pulled him closer, free hand tracing the lines of his armor. And yet, I find myself captivated by the possibilities. You're not angry? He asked. Angry? She flashed sharp, predatory teeth in a grin. My people have spent centuries proclaiming our superiority over all other species. In a single night, you have demonstrated that humans are not just our equals, but potential mates. Her eyes burned brighter. Do you understand what that means? That I'm about to be the most wanted man in the Salarian Empire? Will offered. That, she purred, and so much more. It means evolution, human, change, a future neither of our species ever dared imagine. The cave suddenly felt warmer. His HUD politely informed him Aurelia's pheromone levels had spiked again, and her core temperature was stabilizing rather than crashing. Vitals are settling, he said, fighting to keep his tone clinical. "But we should run more tests, just in case." "Oh, we will," she said, pulling him in until there was no room for cold air between them. "Very thorough tests." A distant explosion rolled to the mountains, followed by the faint echo of engines. Will's tactical display, lit with new contacts bleeding through the storm. "We've got company," he said. "Multiple ships, at least 3, probably more, using the blizzard as cover." Aurelia's expression hardened. The amused queen replaced by the war leader he'd first met on the snow. "The council," she said. "They must have detected the outpost collapse." She rose to her full, imposing height despite the cave's low ceiling, once more every inch a monarch, even with her skin still glowing faintly from the impossible life now growing inside her. "They cannot find us together," she said. "Not yet. Not until we understand what this means." "I'm not abandoning you," Will replied instantly. "You must." She cupped his face between both hands, her touch steady despite the turmoil. "My people will not harm their queen. You, however, they will execute on sight. I need time to prepare them for this." Another explosion boomed closer. Searchlights began to slice through the storm outside, probing for heat signatures. "There is a human settlement 2 days' march south of here," she said quickly. "Find your own kind. I will call for you when it is safe." "How?" he demanded. She pressed a small crystal into his palm. It pulsed with the same inner light that now flickered beneath her skin. "This will guide you back to me," she said, "and to our child. Now go." He hesitated only a heartbeat, then pulled her into a fierce kiss. "This isn't goodbye," he said against her lips. "No," she agreed, pushing him toward a narrow rear passage. "This is only the beginning." Will activated his armor stealth systems and slipped out into the storm as the first Salarian search team reached the main cave entrance. The last thing he heard before the blizzard swallowed all sound was Aurelia's voice, commanding, imperious. Tearing into her guards for taking so long to find their queenness, he forced his way south to the screaming white. The crystal's warm pulse steady against his chest, and his HUD quietly tracked a new data feed. Aurelia's vital signs, and another, smaller heartbeat nested within. "Yeah," he muttered to himself, a grin tugging at his lips despite the blizzard. "That's one way to kickstart human-alien relations." Somewhere above, ships hunted through the storm. Somewhere behind, an empire teetered on the edge of upheaval. And in the frozen dark of a nameless cave, an impossible child had just changed the rules of the galaxy. If you want to see what humans do when the whole empire comes to their queen and their kid, keep listening. 2 days of slogging through alien wilderness did nothing to dent Will's mood. The crystal Aurelia had given him thumped a steady rhythm against his chest, warm even through armor plating. His HUD kept quietly streaming her vitals, and a second, smaller heartbeat, like a distant song. He crested a ridge and finally saw it. The human colony. According to his NAV, the settlement's official name was New Darwin. To his eyes, it looked like every other frontier outpost he'd ever visited. Prefab structures, perimeter walls, patchwork towers. Except this one was gearing up for a war. "Ah, that's new," he muttered. Armored vehicles rolled along the perimeter. Automated turrets were being craned into position. Perimeter shields flickered as they cycled through combat diagnostics. New Darwin wasn't just nervous. It was bracing for something big. The colony's security grid tagged him the moment he started down the slope. Before he was halfway, a squad of powered armor troopers swept out to meet him, weapons trained and locked. "Identify yourself," a voice barked through external speakers. "Commander William Watson ESS Hyperion," he replied, raising his hands. "The rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated." A familiar figure stepped through the squad. Colonel Sarah Hayes, her weathered face lined by years of bad deployments, stared at him for a long second. Then, against all odds, she smiled. "Will," she said, "you were listed Kia. Hyperion reported your shuttle went down in Salarian territory 3 days ago." "Yeah, about that," he said, glancing at the armed perimeter behind her. "Nice decor. Something you want to tell me?" "Looks a little overkill for the local wildlife." Her expression shifted from relief to grim tension. "Walk with me." You're not going to like this. The command center was chaos organized into digital lines. Tactical holo showed ship movements in orbit, both human and Salarian. Analysts argued over intel streams. Automated alerts pulsed in angry colors. The Salarian Empire is tearing itself apart, Hayes said, pulling up classified footage. Their queen vanished 3 days ago, right about when you went off their radar. We'll kept his features neutral. Any clues where Her Majesty wandered off to? That's where it gets wild, Hayes replied. She played a clip of intercepted Salarian transmissions. Frantic, layered voices, snippets of the same shocking word. According to their own secure channels, the queen is pregnant. The hardliners are calling it a genetic atrocity. Will's fingers twitched where they rested against the crystal under his armor. But, Hayes continued, a huge chunk of their military is breaking ranks in her favor. They're calling the child the next phase of evolution. You don't say, Will murmured. The real problem is this guy. Hayes switched the feed to show a towering Salarian male in ornate warplate, eyes like sharpened obsidian. High Commander Pyrax. Claims the queen's been compromised by human agents. Says the pregnancy is evidence of some sort of biological sabotage. Will let out a low whistle. That's one hell of a creative leap. He's using it as justification for a preemptive cleansing of human colonies in the sector, Hayes said. Hence the mobilization. Before we could respond, alarm screamed through the room. A junior officer sprinted up, nearly tripping over their own boots. Colonel, multiple signatures dropping out of FTL, Salarian Royal Guard, vectoring toward orbit over New Darwin. Hayes grabbed her command helmet. Battle stations. All units stand. Wait. We'll cut in, raising his hands. Let me talk to them first. She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Have you lost your mind? I've got connections, he said. The crystal under his armor flared with heat, as if in agreement. The main display flickered. Salarian encryption tried to block the incoming transmission, failed, and surrendered to a higher priority code. The image stabilized. Aurelia filled the screen. She wore full royal armor, far more ornate than the scaled battlesuit he'd first seen on the ice. Her skin shone with inner radiance, her presence so commanding that even through projection the room seemed to straighten up. People of New Darwin, she said, voice resounding through every speaker. I am Queen Aurelia of the Salarian Empire. I come seeking asylum. The command center exploded into overlapping shouts. Hayes barked orders. Tech scrambled to verify authenticity. Someone swore they were dreaming. Will just smiled, feeling the crystal beating in time with his heart. Aurelia's gaze swept the room through the feed and locked onto him. Commander Watson, she said, it appears we have many matters to resolve. Your Majesty, he replied, stepping forward despite Hayes's protest. Glad to see you on your feet. And how are you feeling? Better with each passing day, she answered, a slow smile touching her lips. It held promises that made more than one sensor officer turn away, cheeks flushed. Though I do find myself missing our scientific discussions. Before the room could fully process that, another alarm shrieked. New contacts appeared in orbit. Salarian warships bearing the dark, brutal insignia of Pyrax. My dear queen, a new voice boomed as a second hologram materialized beside Aurelia's. High Commander Pyrax, all jagged armor and fanatic eyes. How convenient to find you nestled among the very humans who poisoned you. The only toxin here is your archaic ideology, Pyrax, Aurelia replied, her voice cold enough to freeze plasma. Stand down. I think not. His smile was a predator's snarl. The council has decreed. You will be purified, the aberration excised, and the human infestation eradicated. We'll step nearer the hollow field until he was almost nose to projection with Pyrax. Hey, tall, dark, and genocidal, he said. That aberration you're frothing about? That's my kid you're threatening. Total silence crashed over every channel. Hayes covered her face with one hand. Several officers choked. Pyrax stared like he'd just been smacked with a wet fish. Aurelia's laughter, rich and unrestrained, broke the tension across the link. Well, my love, she said, that is certainly one way to make an announcement. You dare claim. Pyrax started. Oh, I dare plenty. We'll cut in grin sharp, including getting your queen pregnant. Turns out humans and Salarians aren't as incompatible as you hoped. This is impossible, Pyrax hissed. Clearly not, Aurelia countered, one hand resting protectively over her midsection. Our child embodies everything you fear. Change, adaptation, the end of your precious genetic isolation. And one more thing, Pyrax, nearly half of our fleet stand with me. As if on cue, fresh icons appeared on tactical displays. Salarian warships dropping out of hyperspace bearing the Queen's colors, sliding into formation alongside human defenses. Last chance, Pyrax, will called, stand down or find out why humans are famous for turning bad situations into worse ones for everyone else. The standoff hung suspended for 3 long heartbeats. Then Pyrax's ships began charging weapons. So be it, Aurelia said quietly. Commander Watson, would you like to assist me in resolving this little uprising? Will flex his fingers. Thought you'd never ask, Your Majesty. The battle that exploded over New Darwin was less a fight and more a brutal ballet. Pyrax's loyalists fought with the ferocity of fanatics, willing to burn everything to preserve their old order. But they hadn't planned for one thing, human chaos paired with Salarian firepower. Will stood on the command deck of Aurelia's flagship, the Imperial Dawn, his combat suit jacked into the ship systems. The strange bond forged by the crystal made the interface almost organic. His thoughts flowed into targeting solutions and formation shifts faster than any standard link. Your tactics are non-traditional, Aurelia observed from her throne-like command chair, watching as he directed mixed squadrons in patterns that made her admirals mutter and then gape as they worked. My strategists are horrified. Humans excel at being creatively inconvenient, Will said. Heads up, incoming. Pyrax's flagship belched a wave of plasma torpedoes. Before the Dawn's gunners finished swearing, Will had already plotted a maneuver that turned half the salvo into a lethal cloud, which then chewed through Pyrax's own flank escort. Impressive, Aurelia purred. Her tone shifted in the next breath. She gasped, one hand flying to her abdomen. Will was at her side in an instant. His suit's sensors rushed data to his HUD. Talk to me. What's wrong? The child, her golden eyes widened, bright with shock and wonder. It is growing faster. Much faster. Our combined genetics are accelerating development. A medical officer hurried over with scanners, only to be waved off with royal irritation. I am not in danger, Aurelia insisted. The sensations are intense, but not painful. She caught Will watching her with a mixture of battle focus and raw concern and smiled. Your offspring is as impatient as you are, my reckless human. My queen, her chief advisor interrupted. We are receiving transmissions from across the Empire. News of your condition has spread. Good, Aurelia said, rising to her full, imposing height. The visible swell of her pregnancy did nothing to diminish her authority. Open a channel. All bands, human and Salarian. Bridge crew scrambled. Will move to stand beside her. She leaned into him, just briefly, as the link went live. Citizens of the Salarian Empire, she began, voice carrying the weight of centuries of rule, and honored representatives of humanity. Behold what some call blasphemy, the union of our species, not through conquest or diplomacy, but through love. Propaganda. Pyrax cutting over the line. The humans have tainted our sovereign. Jealous much? Will said. You're just upset you didn't get an invite. Laughter rippled through both fleets, even from some of Pyrax's own ships. Formations wavered. Lines blurred. The old ways are dying, Aurelia continued. Evolution does not ask permission. Our child symbolizes not the death of Salarian purity, but the birth of something greater, a living bridge between our people. She faltered for a second, grimacing. Will's HUD spiked. The medical officer leaned in. The pregnancy is accelerating, he whispered. Hours instead of months. Then we finish this quickly, Will said. He addressed the open channel. Listen up, everyone. Your queen is about to deliver the first human, Salarian hybrid in recorded history. Anyone who's got an objection can take a number and come see me personally afterward. Fair warning, I specialize in impossible odds. The crystal warmed against his chest, and he felt Aurelia's amusement through their link. Always dramatic, she teased, then doubled over as another contraction hit. Medical bay will snapped. Now. The battle, she started. Will wait, he said. He looked to her advisor. You have the con. Don't let Pyrax slip away. And if you can, try not to vaporize him. Might need him as an object lesson later. The advisor bowed. As you command, my lord. Will blinked. We are absolutely revisiting that title conversation later. He scooped Aurelia up despite the difference in height. You enjoy this far too much, she muttered into his neck as he carried her off the bridge. Says the queen who laughed at the thought of breeding with a human, he replied. I am not laughing now. No, he agreed, feeling the crystal sink with both their heartbeats, and something else new and bright between them. But I have a feeling our kid will have a ruthless sense of humor. Behind them, the battle raged. But inside the Imperial Dawn's medical bay, another kind of war, birth, was starting, one that would rewrite two civilizations. A mixed team of human and Salarian specialists scrambled to prepare. Their instruments registered energy readings off any known chart, as if the universe itself were bracing for impact. You know, Will said, gripping Aurelia's hand as the room buzzed around them. This is not how I thought I'd meet your extended family. Her laugh broke into a groan as another surge ripped through her. When this is done, I will make you pay for every ill-timed joke. Promise? Her retort vanished under a new wave of power. The crystal between them burned like a small star, casting wild shadows across the bay. The pristine walls began to hum as the labor accelerated beyond anything in the med team's experience. Will stayed at her side, his armor feeding data into the frantic doctors. Through their link, he felt not just her pain and determination, but something else, a third awareness pushing into existence. My queen, an aide shouted, bursting through the doors. High Commander Pyrax has breached the outer defenses. He's on board, with boarding teams converging on this deck. Will's tactical overlay lit up with hostile signatures crawling through the ship's corridors. Of course he is, Will muttered, because this day wasn't complicated enough already. Aurelia clamped down on his forearm, grip strong enough to snap unarmored bone. Go, she hissed. Protect our child. I'm not leaving you. You're not, she insisted. She pressed the blazing crystal against his chest. We are linked now. Remember? I will feel every step you take. And I want, and I expect, to see you make that pompous warlord regret every insult. The ship shook under internal detonations. Pyrax's troops were carving a path straight toward them. Doctor, Will snapped, eyes still on Aurelia. How long? Minutes, the chief medical officer said, voice tight. Energy levels are beyond anything we understand. Will kissed Aurelia hard. Hold that thought, Your Majesty. I've got a quick errand to run. Try not to let him destroy my ship, she called after him. No guarantees. The corridor outside was already a war zone. Will sealed the medical bay doors behind him and triggered full combat protocols. The crystal pulsed, and his link with the armor deepened. Systems responded before he consciously gave commands. All hands, he broadcast shipwide. This is Commander Watson. We've got uninvited guests trying to ruin the most important delivery in galactic history. Let's show them how humans do hospitality. Human and Salarian crew answered as one, moving in tight coordination through his tactical network. Pyrax's forces suddenly found themselves fighting a hybrid defense. Human unpredictability meshed with Salarian discipline. Impressive. Pyrax's voice boomed over internal comms. But futile. The abomination will not be allowed to live. For someone obsessed with purity, you sure talk about my kid a lot. Will retorted, planning a string of shaped charges in a junction. Compensating for something, High Commander? The taunt worked. Enemy squads overextended, charging straight into his traps. Each blast didn't aim to slaughter, just to funnel them where he wanted. Through it all, the crystal thrummed harder, and we felt Aurelia's presence like thunder building on a distant horizon. Something was coming, Something huge. My lord, a Salarian officer reported, falling into step beside him. Will still wasn't used to the title. Pyrax himself is advancing via the secondary access shaft. He's headed straight for the medical bay's rear entrance. Perfect, Will said. That's exactly where I want him. He reached the rear corridor outside the medical bay just as Pyrax smashed through it, a mountain in ceremonial battle armor, eyes burning with righteous fury. Stand aside, human, Pyrax growled. This is beyond you. See, that's where you're wrong, Will replied, drawing his rifle but not raising it yet. This is exactly where I belong. Want to know why? Your primitive bravado does not. Will felt it then. The crystal's rhythm snapping into perfect sync with the ship's faltering power grid, with Aurelia's straining heartbeat, with something new. Because, he said, my kid is about to make one hell of an entrance. The medical bay doors blew outward, not from explosives, but from light. Blinding radiance flooded the hall, washing over everything like liquid starlight. Systems overloaded. Gravity flickered. For a breathless instant, reality twisted around a single point. The child's birth. Will felt it to the link first, a third mind unfurling, bright and calm and impossibly strong. The crystal shattered against his chest, its energy rushing to join the newborn presence. When the light faded, Pyrax stood frozen mid-step, armor completely dead, weapons lifeless, systems offline. Behind Will, Aurelia lay in the medical bay's central cradle, exhausted but upright, cradling their child in her arms. The baby glowed with soft inner radiance, a perfect fusion of human and Salarian features. Tiny eyes opened, shifting between deep human blue and molten Salarian gold. Well, Will said into the stunned silence, that explains why my hair is standing on end. The infant's gaze drifted over the room. Every device it passed flickered, then stabilized, improved. Systems updated themselves. Code restructured. The ship evolved under that simple, curious stare. Impossible, Pyrax whispered. You keep using that word, Aurelia said, voice hoarse but triumphant. I do not think it means what you believe it means. The ship's communications grid came alive on its own, broadcasting visuals of the newborn across every channel, every vessel, every listening station. No editing, no spin, just the undeniable reality of what had been created. Not just a child, Will realized. A pivot point, not only for us, he breathed, but for everything. Aurelia nodded, eyes soft as she looked at the baby. Evolution demands change, Pyrax, she said. You can embrace it or be buried by it. The fallen commander stared, at her, at the child, at his own powerless armor. Slowly, as if each motion weighed a ton, he dropped to one knee. My queen, he said, voice rough. I was wrong. Yes, Aurelia replied. You were. She lifted her gaze to the feeds she knew were watching from across two civilizations. But that is the point, is it not? We were all wrong, believing our species had reached perfection alone. It took human recklessness and Salarian arrogance colliding to show us a better path. Will moved to her side, unable to stop staring at their child. So, he said lightly, about those titles we were arguing over. Do not push your luck, Commander, she warned. Yes, Your Majesty, he said, grinning. Though at this point, I think we're a bit beyond formalities. The baby made a sound that was suspiciously close to a laugh. Every light on the ship pulsed in response. You know, Will added, we still need a name for the little reality bender. Aurelia studied their child, her expression softening in a way that made Will's chest hurt. In Salarian tradition, she said, children of destiny are named for the moment that forged them. Yeah. Will asked, and what would you call this moment? She smiled. The beginning. 3 months later, Will stood in front of a mirror in their private quarters aboard the Imperial Dawn, wrestling with a diplomatic uniform that felt 10 times more constricting than combat armor ever had. Why do we have so many buttons? He muttered, tugging at a ceremonial collar, clearly designed for someone a foot taller and a lot more dignified. Difficulties with the formal attire, my love? Aurelia's amused voice drifted from the doorway. He turned. She leaned against the frame, resplendent in royal regalia, their child balanced casually on one arm. She was every inch a queen, and every inch something only had seen laugh, swear, and steal blankets. You try fastening this thing when it was tailored for 8-foot aliens, he grumbled. She glided forward with predatory grace, adjusting the collar with one hand while balancing their daughter with the other. You never complained about learning other aspects of Salarian anatomy, she murmured. That was different, he said. I was highly motivated. Their daughter, officially Aurora Dawn, promptly nicknamed Rory by the human crew, giggled. Every device in the room flickered affectionately in response. At 3 months, she already showed the best of both lineages, Aurelia's radiant skin and copper hair, Will's blue eyes and stubborn jaw. Her growth rate sat somewhere between human and Salarian, and her abilities were on a curve no chart could graph. The summit begins in an hour, Aurelia reminded him. Are you prepared to shock the conservative blocs again? Me? Will scoffed. You're the one who told the High Council that human males are surprisingly adaptable, while making eye contact with at least 3 of your former suitors. She laughed, the sound still capable of sending a shiver down his spine. I merely presented data. Besides, requests for human, Salarian parent approvals have tripled since then. Did you also have to tell the entire court about my impressive stamina? He asked. Would you prefer I lied? She countered, leaning down for a brief kiss that made the difference in their height amusingly obvious. Our people must fully appreciate the benefits of genetic diversity. A diplomatic aide's voice crackled over the intercom. Careful not to open the door after previous unfortunate timing. My queen, my lord, delegates are arriving. Time to terrify the galaxy, Will said. He passed Rory back to Aurelia, watching with pride as her daughter immediately started interfacing with her mother's regalia, shifting tiny holograms around like toys. Together? Always, Aurelia replied. The grand diplomatic chamber had been rebuilt to accommodate both human and Salarian preferences. Mixed crews moved through the space with ease, their seamless cooperation drawing stares from first-time visitors. Will noted the appreciative looks from both human and Salarian women, the thinly masked envy from more than a few male dignitaries, and Pyrax, now one of their staunchest supporters, standing like a stone pillar at ceremonial attention. Representatives of Earth and the Salarian Empire, Aurelia began, her voice rolling through the chamber. We gather to formalize an alliance born not merely of politics, but of something far more fundamental. And far more fun, Will added dryly. The smirk he wore made several elders shift uncomfortably. Indeed, Aurelia said, golden eyes glinting. As many of you have heard, some through official channels, many through gossip, our species are unexpectedly compatible. A wave of murmurs swept the room. In the 3 months since Rory's birth, dozens of human, Salarian couples had stepped forward, each producing children with unique strengths. Enhanced tech interfacing, rapid cognitive development, startling genetic stability. The old jokes about human males being too small, one bold Salarian noble declared loudly, have been officially retired. Laughter broke out. Will arched a brow at Aurelia. Should I be worried about how many of your people can verify that personally? Jealous, my love? She asked. Of them? Never, he said. His grin turned sharp. They're not the ones who made the queen of the Salarian Empire scream my name in 3 languages. The chamber detonated in gasps, scandalized laughter, and suspicious amount of intrigued whispering. Rory chose that moment to conjure a holographic replay of her parents' first meeting in the snow, tastefully edited to remove anything that would get the summit shut down. As you can see, Aurelia said smoothly, our daughter has inherited her father's flair for dramatic timing. The negotiations that followed looked nothing like standard diplomatic sessions. Protocol shattered under the weight of a new reality, as both species rewrote expectations on the fly. Every time Rory casually manipulated advanced tech, while humming an alternating mash of human lullaby and Salarian war chant, another old prejudice died a quiet death. You know, Will whispered to Aurelia during a brief recess, when I crashed on your planet, my goals were limited to don't die and find a roof. And instead, she murmured, tracing a finger down his chest, you survived me. Still working on that, he said. Progress report, happily ongoing. Pyrax approached, arms full of data pads. stopping short at their proximity. "My queen, my lord, if this is a private moment, I can—" "Nonsense," Aurelia said, straightening, but not moving her hand from Will's shoulder. "We were merely discussing human-Salarian relations. Very thoroughly," Will added. Pyrax's expression suggested he privately regretted ever opposing them, if only because he now had to witness their unapologetic affection on a daily basis. "The Genetic Council has submitted updated findings," he reported, forcing his tone neutral. "It appears that successful human-Salarian pairings correlate strongly with emotional compatibility." "That's the scientific term for chemistry," Will said. "I believe the human expression is sexual chemistry," Aurelia supplied. Pyrax visibly fought to keep a straight face. Rory, oblivious, created a small light show over his head. "To think," Aurelia said softly, watching their daughter, "all this began because you crashed on my world. Best bad landing of my life," Will said. He slid an arm around her waist as far as he could reach. "And don't pretend you weren't checking me out before you decided to declare me your prisoner." "I was assessing a potential threat," she said with regal dignity. "Exactly," he replied. "You just turned out to be mine." Their banter was cut short as more delegations pressed in, eager to negotiate their own integration into the new human-Salarian framework. The future ahead of them gleamed with possibility, charged with the kind of volatile chemistry that had already changed the galaxy once. At the heart of it all, Rory grew, a living symbol of what happened when someone dared to laugh in the face of impossible. And far beyond Imperial Dawn's hull, in the dark current between the stars, other empires watched the birth of this strange alliance with a mix of fear, hunger, and furious curiosity. Because if a single human crash landing could rewrite the destiny of one empire, what might humanity do to the rest of the galaxy once they decided to stop playing by anyone else's rules? Light years away, in a chamber car from living crystal, a dozen different species watched the same broadcast that had just shaken human and Salarian space. The image of the hybrid child, Rory, hung in the air like a tiny star, eyes shifting from blue to gold as systems upgrade themselves in her presence. "The reports are verified?" a voice like cracking ice asked. Its owner, a long-limbed being of translucent chitin, leaned forward. "No fabrication? No human trickery." The data streams were traced to multiple independent relays. Another replied, this one a floating cluster of bioluminescent tendrils. Cross-confirmed with council-grade encryption. The birth is real. The power readings are unprecedented. A heavy, scaled creature with plated jaws slammed a fist into the table. "We allowed the mammals to spread too far. First they disrupted regional balances, then they toppled minor empires, and now this, a hybrid capable of rewriting technology at a glance. The issue is not merely the hybrid," a robed figure said quietly from the far end of the chamber. Unlike the others, this one wore a humanoid frame under concealing fabric. Only faintly luminescent eyes were visible beneath the hood. It is what their existence implies. Humans and Salarians have discovered cross-species compatibility that yields exponential expansion, not degeneration. The accord was meant to prevent this, the chitinous speaker hissed. No high species were to mix genetic lines. We all agreed. Humans, the robed figure cut in calmly, were not present when the accord was signed. Silence fell. Somewhere in the chamber, a monitoring node replayed the moment Will had said, "That's my kid you're talking about," and the queen had laughed like she didn't care who heard. "Arrogant," muttered the scaled warlord, "and dangerous. Both of which," the robed one murmured, "tend to precede paradigm shifts." Charts bloomed above the table. Projections of hybrid proliferation, alliance expansion, technology curves bending upward at obscene angles. If even a fraction of these unions are as successful as the first, the tendril being said, the combined human-Salarian bloc could outpace every civilization in this quadrant within 2 centuries. Their children are already rewriting the rules of interface science mere months after birth. And if those children learn war, the plated creature demanded, if that infant decides to test its abilities on fleets instead of med bays, the council has options, the chitinous one said. Containment, isolation, preemptive, Destruction? The robe figure finished, voice mild. You propose to eliminate a species pair that just demonstrated the ability to break our oldest assumptions on live broadcast before half the galaxy? They are a threat, the warlord growled. Threats must be neutralized. Or harnessed, the robed one suggested. Several gazes turned toward them. Explain, the tendril being said. The mammals have already proven willing to defy centralized authority, the robed figure said. The Salarian Empire is fracturing along ideological lines. Humanity has never met a rule they didn't test. Crushing them outright will be expensive. Even if we succeed, every lesser species will see it as fear. Fear what they could become. The chitinous one snapped. Exactly. A faint smile touched the shadowed lips under the hood. Imagine, instead we give that fear direction. A new hollow formed. Scenarios of proxy wars, engineered crises, external threats carefully introduced at the fringes of human Salarian space. Patterns of pressure meant not to annihilate, but to mold. We present them with enemies, the robed figure continued. Obstacles. Challenges sized just large enough to force evolution along paths we can predict. We make them fight, adapt, grow in ways we anticipate and can exploit. The warlord snorted. You want to train them like weapons. What happens when the blade turns on the hand that forged it? Then we will discover, the robed one said softly, whether the galaxy truly deserved to stagnate under old laws. The chamber murmured. Votes silent and digital flashed through secure bands. The decision took less than a minute. Very well, the tendril being said at last. We authorize controlled provocation. Limited assets, deniable operations. No direct engagement by primary council fleets. Yet, and the hybrid? The chitinous speaker pressed. The child herself? A separate hollow appeared. Rory again, older in this projected scenario, standing amid a swirl of data and star charts, eyes blazing. We observe, the robed figure said. We adapt our plans as she grows. If she remains a localized anomaly, we adjust. If she becomes an avatar of something larger, a small shrug, then history was always going to break somewhere. They lifted a hand. Across the chamber, hidden transceiver arrays awoke. Begin with subtlety, they ordered. Probe their borders, test their responses, and under no circumstances, they added, let them know the High Council is paying attention. Far away, in a quiet corner of the Imperial Dawn, a 3-month-old hybrid lifted her head from her nap and frowned in her sleep. For the first time, a faint static pricked at the edge of her awareness, like someone whispering behind a closed door. Rory's eyes snapped open, shifting gold, then blue, then a color no human instrument had a name for yet. The lights in the nursery dimmed, then brightened, as she reached out with a sense she didn't have words to describe. Something large moved in the far dark. She made a small, unhappy sound. Systems around her responded instantly. Cradles adjusting, environmental controls softening. A dozen monitors pinging Aurelia and Will arrive first, half out of uniform, hair tousled, eyes instantly scanning for threats. Hey, Starshine, he murmured, scooping her up. What's got you spooked? Rory calmed the moment his arms closed around her, but she kept staring at the ceiling, as if she could see through the metal. Her tiny fingers clenched in the fabric of his shirt. The ship's heartbeat, engines, life support, structural fields, synced to hers. Aurelia stepped in, crown absent, expression softer than anyone outside their inner circle had ever seen. She felt something, the Queen said quietly. Another ship? Will asked. Sensor anomaly? Not yet, Aurelia replied, gazed distant for a moment as she tapped into their shared link. Farther, like a storm beyond the horizon. No shape, only pressure. Will kissed Rory's forehead. If the universe is stupid enough to send trouble, he said, it picked the wrong family to mess with. Arrogant, Aurelia chided. Accurate, he corrected. Rory giggled. The sound making the room's wall panels briefly display a cascade of star maps, routes that didn't exist on any official chart. Aurelia and Will traded a look. Whatever's coming, Aurelia said, she will not face it alone. Damn right, Will agreed. We already broke one empire's rules by accident. Imagine what happens when we start doing it on purpose. Elsewhere on the ship, Pyrax oversaw joint training drills, watching human, and Salarian squad scramble through new hybrid tactics. He paused, frowning as a brief, inexplicable shiver ran through the deck under his feet. He looked out at the stars and, for the first time, felt something he'd never associated with humans before. Not annoyance, not contempt, anticipation. He tapped his wrist console, opening a secure line to the royal couple. My queen, commander, I wish to propose additional fleet exercises along the outer sectors. There are currents in the outer lanes that feel wrong. You think someone is coming, Aurelia said. I think, Pyrax answered. Someone has noticed what we have done. Will's grin came through the line, audible even without video. Good. Saves us the trouble of sending invitations. Rory, balanced on Aurelia's hip as they spoke, reached out and touched the comm panel. For a fraction of a second, all three of them, Queen, Warrior, Child, shared the same compressed flash of information. A crystal chamber. Watching eyes. A robed figure turning toward them like they had just felt the contact. The link snapped. Rory blinked, then smiled in a way that was very much her mother's and very much her father's, and entirely her own. Looks like we'd just been upgraded from local problem to galactic concern, Will said softly. Then let the galaxy be concerned, Aurelia replied, golden eyes blazing. We did not start as equals, but we will not stay small while they decide our limits. Behind them, tactical hollow screens lit up with new training schedules, accelerated shipyard outputs, expanded integration protocols for hybrid children. Humans and Salarians had already proven they could rewrite one empire's destiny by accident. Now, with their enemies watching, they were about to see what happened when they tried on purpose. Because somewhere between the stars, a hidden council had just marked them as a variable to control. And if there was one thing the universe should have learned by now, it was this. Telling humans what they could become had never once worked out the way anyone expected. If you want to see what happens when a High Council finally stops hiding and discovers that a fragile hybrid child has already touched their systems, then stay tuned. The galaxy hasn't seen HFY yet,